Everyone has at least one good story. What's yours? Story 1. I got moved to a team on the 2nd floor. My desk was on the 4th floor. I stopped coming to work. The 4th floor team thought I moved downstairs. The 2nd floor team thought I was still upstairs. I just worked from home instead for over a year. Story 2. Former coworker got shot in the head during his time in the army. As they tried to remove the bullet, a tumor was found. This tumor would have killed him within a year. He survived and is alive and kicking. Story 3. Back in the 90s, I worked at an engineering supply shop. It was called Cogs Unlimited, and it was basically a huge warehouse with thousands of different types of cogs and other equipment. It looks a bit like this. My job was to answer the phone and take the orders, write down the serial numbers and quantity, then pass that on to the other guys who would locate the correct shelf and retrieve the parts to be sent to the buyers. Anyway, our phone number was similar to the phone number of a Santa phone service. Basically, kids call the number and talk to a voice actor playing Santa. The problem is that we would often get kids calling our number, expecting it to be Santa, but instead are greeted by an unenthusiastic greeting of Cogs Unlimited. At first I would just let them know they had the wrong number, but as it got closer to Christmas, the calls became more and more frequent, so I had to do something. If it was a slow day, and I got a call from a kid expecting Santa, I would just play the role of Santa, and ask what they want for Christmas, tell them they're on the good list, etc. Unless the kid was rude. I remember one annoying little brat who called and demanded an unreasonable amount of presents. As Santa, I let him know that he's on the bad list and will only be getting coal, and that I've sent some of my elves over to his house to hide in the garden and scare him. A few minutes after I hung up, I received a phone call from his furious mother, demanding to know why I told her child all those bad things. I told her we just sell cogs, and that she's got the wrong number, and I never heard from her again. Story 4. I have a lot, but hey, race 1. I went to a house party once. People were all around the place. Living room, dining room, bedroom, just drinking and chatting. At some point, one guy started to hook up with a girl. They went to the bedroom to when they got there were 2 guys and 1 girl. They realized the couple was going to use the bedroom, so they started to leave. One of the guys, though, turned off the lights while leaving, but he realized the bedroom got really dark, so he closed the door and managed to stay inside hidden. The couple started to make out on the bed, taking their clothes off, and my friend was watching hidden jerking off. At some point, your eyes get used to the dark, right? The girl was on all fours, while the guy was banging from behind. Then, all of a sudden, she screams, "Oh my God, there's someone here." My friend then started to apologize, putting his away while turning on the lights. That's when the 3 of them saw it. Another ninja jerker managed to stay inside the bedroom, at the corner masturbating. They both apologized and left the room. Edit. Sorry for the English, in Brazilian. Edit. It's an old post of mine from here. Story 5. I've told this one before, but whatever, it's a favorite. I was in middle school in the early 1990s, around when Sam's Clubs and the like started opening up. None of us could drive, yet obviously we were like 14 and few of our parents had club memberships, so it was rare that anyone could go there and buy stuff. And none of us had jobs or anything anyway, so you're looking at about 5 in allowance here and there as your budget. One kid had a great idea and bought some of those huge bags of blow pops for 5. Let's say he walked away with 100 blow pops, 5 CA piece. He came to school and sold them for a quarter and was out of stock within a few days. He did this for probably 3 weeks before others got in on the game. There were a bunch of arguments over whether the others had to go into a different line of candy, or if blow pops were fair game. The first wave decided that everyone needed their own kind of candy, creating a little cartel, kind of funny in retrospect. About a month or so later, a new kid starts selling, and he has everything, must have spent 50, maybe 100, but he quickly ran into a problem. The school started cracking down on student-run candy sales in the cafeteria, so lunchtime, where the money was, became a really dangerous time to sell. Most of the kids who were selling just stopped, cashing out while they could, but this one kid had way too much candy to do that. There were only 4 classes after lunch and you really weren't selling candy during the first 2 periods, so that left 5 or 6 reasonably good times to find customers. The bad news was that typically you had the same kids give or take in all of your classes by now, because we were broken up into levels. The exception, things like gym and band, were really bad times to sell candy. The good news was that homeroom was between 2nd and 3rd period, and that was homogeneous. So you got to see kids you'd otherwise not see, and more importantly, they'd see kids you'd otherwise not see. The kid with all the candy ended up repackaging it into Ziplocs of 5 pieces and sold them to kids for 1 each. That happened for a few days until one of the kids in his homeroom asked to buy 5, explaining that he was reselling the candy for 25 CA piece and effectively getting a free piece of candy each day. And there were a few kids in his next period class who wanted to do the same. He offered 4 because he wanted to make a profit off his friends. The kid with all the candy agreed, and not only sold out by the end of the week, but ended up buying another 50 or so worth of candy to do it the next week too. A few other kids in the homeroom caught wind of this and wanted in. Candy Kid ended up selling 5 bags at a time to about 5 or 10 kids in his homeroom, each seeing the opportunity to make a free $1 a day just by being middlemen. It was an easy sale. You tell your friends how you bought the candy and sold it quickly and flash them the wad of singles you had. It worked for 2 days, maybe 3. Basically, the entire grade got flooded with candy sellers, and the candy being sold wasn't scarce anymore because the supply wasn't controlled by one person or a cartel. It was a commodity now. Prices crashed to like 10 cents per piece and the MLM-style distribution structure couldn't support that price. The whole supply dried up pretty quickly thereafter, and with teachers starting to crack down, no one re-entered the market for months. Story 6. When I was 10, I rescued this 3MO puppy from a shelter. I was a pretty shy kid and I basically did everything with this puppy. She was my best friend. A few years later my parents divorced. I decided to live with my father, and shortly after the divorce, he began to see this younger woman who didn't like dogs. They eventually married, and one day I came home from school and my puppy was gone. My dad had gotten rid of her to fulfill his new wife's wishes. I was heartbroken. Fast forward 4 years later, my junior year of high school, my grandmother gets this call from a shelter who says, "We found your dog." Despite being completely confused and perplexed as to what they were talking about, my grandma went to the shelter to see what they were talking about, and it turned out to be my baby girl. We had chipped her thankfully. Even though 4 years had passed, it didn't matter. I had gotten her back again and wasn't going to let anything come in the way. Now 22 and 5 years later from getting her back, my almost 13 years old puppy is still with me. First pick is when I got her back, other 6 are since. Hey everyone. So a lot of people have been asking how my dad and I are now. We are okay now. It's still a major wound between us, but we've worked through it. He's apologized and acknowledged what he's done, and that's what really matters to me in the end, because of how much it affected me as a kid. It will always hurt me when I think about it, but those are years I can never get back, so I try to be understanding, positive about the situation more, so then maybe I should despite what he did even though it wrecked me. He is a pretty big though if I'm honest with myself, so all the name calling is pretty appropriate in the end. Sliced Bananas pretty much nailed it from the beginning. I just try to be the better person. A lot of people have also been asking if my dog recognized me. I think so. My grandmother and I went to go pick her up from the shelter together, and when I opened her cage, she ran straight to me and seemed to press into my chest. From then on I just assumed she had. It was a very nerve-wracking experience. I was so nervous that she wouldn't recognize me. Also, nope, I still don't know what happened to her during those 4 years. Apparently my dad had initially given her to my aunt who arranged for a friend to give her to another friend type of thing, but I really don't know at this point, and given the state she was in when I got her back, it's probably best it remains a mystery. She was in really bad physical condition, and she had a lot of emotional scarring. She was deathly afraid of men, both of which took months to rehabilitate. I think it would kill me inside to know what she went through. Story 7. TLDR. Witnessed a volcanic eruption. I grew up in a place called Taupo, New Zealand, and just out of town is a volcano called Mount Ruapehu. One particular day I was staring out the window when I noticed a thick plume of ash rising up and told the teacher that it had just erupted. But being the class clown, she thought it was just another one of my disruptions, until the quiet kid in class spoke up. She had told us to stay where we are and left the classroom to talk with the other teachers about what to do, but by the time she had come back the ash had reached us. It was 11 a.m. on a Tuesday morning and now it was as black as night. She then told us that if our parents usually pick us up then to wait in class, but if we lived close by then we could leave. My best friend lived just down the road and decided to grab our stuff and leave. You'll never forget the moment we opened the classroom door and stepped outside. Everything was covered in a thick coat of soot and ash, and it was just so freaking dark, which made crossing the road scary, as you could barely see the headlights of approaching cars until they were right in front of you. But thankfully it was the only road we had to cross on our walk home, and the rest of the way was through a gully that took us right to my backyard. The next morning I woke up and it felt a lot colder than it usually did, but I just wanted to watch the morning episode of Captain Planet for once and went running for the TV. My mother walked in and said I thought you'd be outside playing with the others, but I had no idea what she meant. I looked outside my window and saw that it had actually snowed at my house for the first time ever. Apparently after a volcanic eruption it causes a volcanic winter which can make it snow. I had the longest driveway that went downhill, had a slight turn and went down even further into a cul-de-sac, so all the neighborhood kids came to play at my house to slide down my driveway. I've never been that happy in my entire life. I missed that day. Edit. I forgot how to words. Story 8. Was asked to dress as a whale mascot for a parade. Rode on the bumper of an ancient fire truck on the oldest day of the year. Some combination of CO and heat caused me to begin projectile vomiting within the costume. Then I passed out. Luckily I had my flipper secured enough to keep me on the truck. Last thing I heard was, "Mommy, what's wrong with that whale?" as I began dangling unconscious for the remainder of the route. Came to as they were loading us into a flatbed to get back to our cars. Dad made me ride on trash bags home. 20 years ago, I can still smell the moment. Story 9. I was fishing with a friend in a small pond a few years ago. My friend cast out a few times and went to reel in, but he snagged something about halfway back. Though it was just a branch or some weeds, but when he pulled it up out of the water his hook was embedded in the of a 10-inch purple that was burned on the end for some reason. I thought that was pretty hilarious and he'll probably never forget it. TLDR. Dildo fishing. Story 10. My first day of first grade I was waiting for the bus with my mother. The street I lived on connected to a very busy huge hill of a main road. I watched this woman zoom down this curve on a bicycle going way too fast and hit a pothole. She flipped her bike and flew over her handlebars and hit a car that was coming up the road. Traffic stopped and my mom ran to this lady. She took her shirt off and started wrapping her head with the bleeding. I stayed with this lady while my mom ran back to our house and called 911. This was the early 90s and cell phones weren't a thing. I guess life was a little more trusting back then too, because no one thought twice about a 6-year-old caring for a bleeding unconscious woman in the road. Kicker is, None of these passengers in stopped cars did anything but stand around and watch. I truly believe it was this strange and traumatic moment that made me the terribly overcautious paranoid child I was and pursue nursing as an adult. I will never ever forget that lady, and I never knew what happened to her either after the ambulance came and took her away. TLDR, I was late for my first day of school because I was covered in someone else's blood. Story 11 Edit TLDR went on family vacation and ended up in the middle of combat action. Posted in similar thread a while ago when I was in 4th grade circa 94. My family went to visit St. Petersburg. After being there for a couple of days we went for another walk around the center of city along one of its canals. We were on this exact same path few days prior as the center is not extremely big and fun to walk around. A little distance down the street we spotted a statue. Normally, it wouldn't be a big deal as St. Petersburg is covered all over in amazing statues and art. However, the thing was that this statue wasn't there few days prior to that. We were down this very road and this very street a few days ago, and none of us remember the statue being there, so they must have put it up few days prior to that day. Keep in mind that this is early 90s, the whole country is in, economy is terrible, people are poor and jobless, there is shortage of food etc., but someone decided to put up a new statue. This seemed very odd and illogical for that period of time in Russia. These were my parents' arguments as I was too young to comprehend all this. Anyways, being normal tourists we decided to get closer to the statue and check it out. As we started moving closer we heard some ruckus behind us down the road. We turned around and after a bit we saw cars driving fast towards us and police sirens becoming more and more sound. We moved across the street and stood closer to the building. The noise became louder and the cars were getting closer, moving in our direction. As the cars got closer, I noticed that one of the cars was in fact a tank. Next thing we know a car full of some weird equipment zooms right by us, followed by this tank, followed by a couple of police cars with blaring sirens. All of us were in awe. Like WTF, our parents held me and my brother closely so we don't run off. But it gets more up. We follow the cars and mainly the tank with our eyes. All the cars speed down the street in same direction we were walking to check out the new statue. The leading car with the equipment goes around the statue. Right behind it was the tank and it didn't even try to turn and just smashed head on into the statue. It didn't even slow down. The very statue that we just talked about, the brand new statue that was just put up. It was now destroyed by none other than a tank. The tank kept going straight ahead like nothing ever happened. We are all now in shock looking at each other with our jaws dropped. Like, did that just happen? What just happened? What does this mean? Are we at war? Is this some sort of civil unrest or rebellion? Once again, keep in mind this is early 90s, so all of these assumptions are very reasonable. This is what my parents and brother are discussing. After looking around and trying to see other people's reaction, we noticed a policeman down the street. The policeman just stood there, not moving or calling for backup, just staring in the direction of where the statue just stood, in the direction where the tank just drove away. My dad decided to walk over to the policeman and ask if he knew what just happened. So my dad walked over to the policeman while my brother, mom and I stayed back. They chatted for a few minutes and my dad started walking back to us. You could tell by his walk and facial expression that he was a little less tense than before he left. What did the policeman say? We all asked in unison. With a slight smirk Dad responded, "It's the Americans, they are shooting a new James Bond movie, it's called GoldenEye or something." Story 12 When I was 2.5 years old I left my house and walked for 10 minutes, crossing at least 6 roads before entering a pub. I took in the police car on the ride home. Story 13 When I was 16 two friends and I stole 23 garden gnomes from one street, 16 from one house and the rest just across the road. It also included a little elfish house and a pretty hefty stone toadstool, mainly because we were kids. It was 2000 in a small town in England and we had all to do. We set them up on my friend's downstairs coffee table, put the table directly in front of the living room door so that when his mum got up for work she would properly herself. Screams happened, things were said, and grounding was the conclusion. Anyways, several weeks later I am over my friend's house and his mum tells him in no uncertain terms to get rid of them, or at least some of them as they were, and I quote a pain in the, so being a good son he agrees, and being a good friend he comes up with a scheme. An hour or two later there we are, backpacks full with war-damaged gnomes beaten with hammers and covered in fake blood, even made one of them a little sling and another had a cast on its leg and a note from the leader of the United Gnome Nation. This note went on to explain that the gnomes from this street were called up for a war against the evil gnome empire, and in order to protect the realm they had to leave. It accounted for the lost gnomes and for their absence, and the note was littered with 4-lettered swear words we were 16 and cool as. We drop them off in front the owner's garden gate, leave the note propped up against the leader and go about our lives as if nothing had ever happened. A week later, a friend comes over with a local newspaper, the Wokingham Times, front page and center. We see the article, seeing read a prankster's gnome joke. It was gnome joke when sick pranksters returned a woman's stolen ornaments to her garden covered in fake blood. That's right, I got to front page with a gnome prank before Reddit even existed. And yes, I will post a picture of the article when I get home tonight. Edit apologies guys. I am noobing all over the place here. Long time lurker so be gentle. Siren37 was a total dude and suggest I just edit this post. Years of dicking about here and I didn't think to do that. Link to the article, edit to yeah if remind me, ours is some sort of auto notification formatting. Do I feel like an idiot? I'm going to bed. When I was 18 I watched my father die on a random driveway as I gave him CPR. He had a heart attack while on a walk with my mother, and she ran inside a house and called 911 and me. I was an EMT off duty at home at the time and showed up at the same time as emergency services. When I got on scene, I started doing chest compressions as a firefighter used an ambu bag on him for air. I clearly remember every second of the incident, and I can and have written it out many times in an effort to deal with it and get it out of my head. I used to have horrible nightmares, and I couldn't get the thought of my father's vomit-covered dead face out of my mind for a good 2 years. After a few minutes of CPR, a defibrillator showed up and they shocked my dad once. He regained a sinus rhythm for a moment and then flatlined again. We put him in an ambulance and sent him to the hospital. He was declared DOA. I remember my mother softly holding back tears and asking if everything was going to be okay. I was 18 and didn't know what to say. So I said, "Nobody is dead till a doctor says they're dead." She told me to go home and call our family to let them know what happened. When I got home, I cried my eyes out and then got ready to call my dad's mom, sister, and brother, my brother, sister, and my mom's mother. Before I could muster the strength to call, my mother called from a hospital to say the doctors had declared him dead. I then had to tell my grandmother that her son was dead and his brother and sister, their brother, was dead. I had to tell my siblings that our father was dead. It was up. I hate thinking about it, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I feel a little numb writing it out here. It brings back crazy flashes of images I don't ever want in my head again. The anniversary is May 9th. It will be 22 years. TLDR, I gave my father CPR as he died when I was 18. Edit if you are interested. I told the entire story on the 20th anniversary during my podcast. Story 14. I was 17 going clubbing with friends who were all 18. I have a somewhat late birthday. 18 is the legal age here in the UK, and was using an ID that looked a bit like me, that my brother had found on the floor. I had already had ridiculous amounts to drink and stumbled up to the bouncer and gave him my ID, my actual ID. The confusion on his face made me realize this, so I slurred out the words, "Oh sorry man, wrong one," and proceeded to swap them round. I don't know why I thought that would work. Needless to say, it got confiscated. At least I got a free ride home from the police. Story 15. TLDR, my girlfriend and I stumbled upon 2 change machines giving out free money. Once on a random weekday during the middle of the day, my girlfriend and I were both off work and ended up in an arcade by the bowling cinema complex. In the UK, don't know about elsewhere, these arcades always have machines to win small amounts of coins and useless toys. So I go to the change machine to get some 10p coins. I put in 20p, but instead of 2x 10p coins dropping out, I get 2 by 1, strange. So anyway, I still want my 10p coin so I can play the machine, so I put in another 20p coin I had in my pocket, and again I get 2 by 1 back. At this point I figured something was up and I call my girlfriend over and tell her I put 40p in the machine and it gave me 4. I tried putting in the only other coin I had, which was a 50p coin. Sure enough, I got 5 by 1 from the machine. I don't know what's going on, so I try putting a 1 coin in, and I get 10 by 1 coins back. Neither of us can quite believe what is happening, but I try a couple more times just recycling the 1 coins into the machine, and I keep getting 10 by 1 coins back. After about 4 times, nothing happens. The machine must be out of coins. We are both at this point extremely confused, excited, and somewhat paranoid. There's nobody else around. The whole place is dead. My pockets are full of 1 coins. I go to the other machine and cautiously put in another 1 coin, and magically 10 by 1 coins come out again. Both machines are doing this for some reason. I try a couple more times on that machine and eventually the paranoia just gets too much for us and we both think something weird is going on here. We should, go, so we both quick walk out of there, me looking like some kind of paranoid Basil Fawlty, just wanting to get to the car so we can collect our thoughts. My pockets are so loaded with coins they are falling down. I have literally no more space on me to carry 1 coins. When we get in the car we both sit there and I begin emptying my coins into my girlfriend's lap. We count something 70 to 80 in 1 coins and seriously discuss if we are the subject of one of those TV prank shows. The whole thing was just so surreal, with nobody around and both machines just giving out free money to us. We drove home and nothing else ever came of it, so we came to the conclusion that someone must have put in rolls of 1 coins for some reason into both machines, instead of 10p coins. Either way, it was one of those things that happened which was just super funny surreal at the time and is always one of our favorite stories to reminisce about. Yeah, I know we're technically thieves, but it was magical. Story 16 was at a bar with some friends and a bachelorette party came over. They had these dares things going and one of them was for the bride to kiss a girl. They came to my group and asked if anyone wants to do it and I was drunk so I said yes. We started making out and I really enjoyed it a lot, way more than I imagined. And that's the story of how I realized I'm actually. Story 17. One time my younger brother was vacuuming the house and came across a large huntsman spider. Instead of trapping it or killing it or telling literally anyone else in the house, he decided to just it up in the vacuum and be done with it. He left the vacuum with the bag still inside in the laundry while we went on holiday for a couple of weeks. We returned to the house infested with tiny spiders. We started killing them. They started getting bigger. Eventually we had to have the house fumigated. For added horror, feel free to Google image search Australian huntsman and keep in mind a full-sized one of those bad boys can be as big as your hand. Edit people commenting that they're bros because they eat bugs and aren't venomous enough to kill you. They're also giant hairy beasts that stick to your skin if they land on you and run faster than my dog. Y'all need Jesus. Story 18. During a time in my life when I was post-divorce, deep in debt, living paycheck to paycheck on an impossibly thin budget, I turned in all my airline miles for a free solo trip to Vegas. I had astigmatism and couldn't afford corrective lenses, so I went to the optical shop for a free pair of sample contacts so I could see the strip in all its majesty. On my first day there, I put in the lenses and accidentally scratched my right eye. Overnight it became painfully infected. I went to the clinic and was diagnosed with a huge corneal ulcer that threatened to permanently blind that eye. I was given antibiotics, but I needed to be seen several more times because the injury was so severe. I had no insurance and no way to pay for this. The doctors were great, so I wasn't afraid of losing my eye, but the medical bills on top of my financial situation would have been devastating. I went to the Treasure Island casino gift shop and bought a toy eye patch to cover the wound, skull and crossbones. Of course, then, I took the $20 I had in my pocket and went to work. I'm not a gambler, but I knew the video blackjack machines had the best odds. I built up small wins, and had them cut down by losses, leaving me with only $5. I went for a walk and tried to get my head right, tried again and lost that $5 too. I went to my bank's website, borrowed a $20 advance, and took it out at the ATM. I tried again. This time things came together. I managed to grow that 20 into just over 500, enough to cover my bills. I stopped there, not wanting to press my luck further. The toy eye patch now hangs on my refrigerator, next to a magnet from the ophthalmologist's office. It's a reminder of the time I gambled for mercy and won. Story 19. One time I was flying from Long Beach, California to Dulles near DC. I'm in the waiting area, and I see a girl from my school. Being a freshman in high school at the time, I was pretty much in love with every girl I saw, but I had had a special crush on this girl, Annie, for all of a month because she was a cute little theater geek who was one of the nicest and bubbliest of people I had ever met. I never was that kid who was afraid of talking to girls, so I went over and shot the with her while we were waiting for boarding. On the actual plane, she was all the way in the back and I was right over the wing, so I didn't see her during the actual flight. So for some background, I'm terrified of airplanes. On an airplane, I have to be able to see the horizon and the earth out the window. I have to know what's going on. I will sit in a window seat and grab the armrest hard enough that it's like I'm trying to fly the airplane through them. For the entire flight my arms and neck always ache for a day or so afterwards. If we are going through clouds, or it's at night over the ocean, I flip out and go into an anxiety attack and completely shut down. So I'm doing my usual thing, trying to fly the plane through the armrests and staring intently through the window while trying not to make any noises or freak out the people next to me. This flight was somewhat bad because it was at night, and there were clouds everywhere, and whoever was on the window seat on the other side of the plane had closed the window so I couldn't see the horizon or the ground if the plane turned left. So basically, but then the unthinkable happened, and I had to go to the bathroom. I have literal nightmares about airplane bathrooms. No windows. Modern airliners all have this computer software called Airborne Collision Avoidance System. Essentially, it uses radar to tell if a plane is too close to another plane, and makes it automatically dive if it thinks it's too close and might crash. So guess when it malfunctioned while I was peeing, I scream in terror. I wasn't the only one in the plane doing that. Actually, while the plane goes into a nosedive, I freak out and zip up too quickly, causing myself to scream in pain. I was the only one this time. The pilot has corrected the plane by this point, so I clean myself up and sneak back into my seat while everyone is distracted by the PA message telling them what happened. I run into Annie a few days later, and we were all like weird. We saw each other on that flight. That dive thing was weird. Yeah, and then she says yeah, some guy was screaming in the bathroom, and he kept on screaming. It kind of creeped me out. She will never know it was May. Was a part of a robotics team my senior year of high school, ended up winning in a regional competition in California, and made it to the national in St. Louis, MO. Two friends and I shared a hotel room and basically just hung out all night and played video games. Around the wee hours of the morning, maybe 1 to 2 a.m., I decide I'm not ready to call it a night, which I should have since we had a competition in the morning, and wanted to venture out into the street to walk around Louis. Upon opening the door I hear something rip. Those sly chaperones did the OL tape on the door trick to see who snuck out at night. Now, I was fairly straight edge in high school, didn't get around to smoking or drinking until after I had graduated and never got in trouble at school. Being so early in the morning my mind started racing thinking I'd be in big trouble and worrying so much about getting kicked from the team or being suspended. I woke one of my friends up and asked what to do and he just brushed it off and went back to sleep. So, in my worried state, I proceeded to tear the tape off of every door on that floor. About halfway through I start wondering, man, do we really have this many people on our team? I had a huge wad of tape after a while, and it did take a while since I was scared of waking anyone up and basically solid snaked it, hugging the wall and peering over every corner. Finally the deed was done and disposed of the baseball in some planter. By the time I get down to the lobby I'm too tired to walk out and just hang by some grand piano they have there. By morning everyone is wondering who went out and I just kept a straight face not wanting to get caught. While we're having breakfast downstairs I overhear someone talking about the missing tape. It turns out there was another team, an all-girls team on the same floor, who got in trouble before lights out for having a guy in their room and the whole thing was blamed on them. In the end, I fessed up to prevent them from getting in serious trouble and had the lobby guy vouch for me that I was just hanging out downstairs hammering out some tunes on the grand piano. Anyway, that's the one story I tell every now and then. Story 20. Mine is something that happened about a week ago. A woman got out of her car, she was the driver, and then looked me right in the eye and started screaming about how much of a I was. I had never seen her before, and I had just turned out of my neighborhood so I didn't do anything to anger her. Everyone around me in the other cars looked just as confused as I was. So I just started laughing and she just got back in her car. The rest of the ride to the gym was normal. I will likely never get an answer to this.